Have you ever stopped to think about why certain places in the house seem to drain your energy? You know that room that, every time you enter, seems heavier? It's not your imagination. Now, here's an unexpected question. What if I told you that the solution to your financial problems might be in the toilet? It sounds crazy, I know, but stay with me, because what you're about to hear could turn your perception upside down. For years, I thought debts were just numbers, that bad luck was a matter of statistics, that poverty was the result of bad decisions. But that changed on an ordinary day, perhaps the most ordinary of all, when an old friend told me something that, at the time, seemed completely ridiculous. You need to throw this in the toilet and flush. And no, I'm not talking about trash. That kept hammering in my head. How could throwing something away solve a problem that had been haunting me for months? But it was as if a part of me, tired of everything, decided to listen just this once. After all, what did I have to lose? The curious thing is that, throughout history, the bathroom has always been treated as a space of exclusion, the place where we leave behind what no longer serves us. But what if that wasn't just literal? Today, I'm going to show you how a symbolic gesture, made in a place that almost no one pays attention to, can completely transform the flow of your life. It's not superstition, nor cheap magic. It's an ancient practice that combines intention, release, and an ingredient you probably have in your kitchen right now. And if you doubt it, even better, because that's exactly how I started. The bottom of the well. Everything started to crumble slowly. First, it was the reduction in work hours, then the end of the contract, and then, like a house of cards, my stability began to crumble before my eyes. The bills that I used to pay, without even glancing at them twice, began to pile up on the kitchen table. Light, water, rent, medicine for the kids. Gradually, the bank's calls became more frequent than those from my own friends. There were many days when I stayed up late, lying in silence in the dark, trying to understand where everything had gone wrong. I wondered, was it a mistake? A series of bad choices? Or was there something bigger that I wasn't seeing? I started looking for answers everywhere. I watched motivational videos, read about wealth, mindset, filled the wall with affirmations. I tried smiling in the mirror, creating vision boards, even praying to deities I didn't even know well, but nothing changed. And that was the worst kind of despair, the one you feel even when you're trying to do everything right. It was then, on one of those gray days, that I received an unexpected call. It was James, an old colleague, somewhat eccentric, who always showed up at the most improbable moments. He said, "Dude, I know you're feeling down. I went through that, and what got me out of the hole was not what you imagine. It was a ritual, simple, symbolic, and powerful." The first reaction was to laugh. I thought he was joking, but he spoke with such serene conviction that, for the first time in weeks, I became curious. "You just need something you already have at home," he said, "and from the most forgotten place in the house too." He told me just enough to intrigue me. He didn't give details. He just planted the seed. And that's how, without truly believing, I decided to try, because, at that time, the fear of continuing as I was greater than the fear of looking ridiculous. The ritual begins. That night, after hanging up the phone, I lay staring at the ceiling for a while. Part of me was still laughing at the idea. The other desperately wanted it to work. James didn't explain everything. He just said that I needed 3 things: an object from the kitchen, something to write with, and the courage to set skepticism aside. At least for a few minutes, there I was, at 2 in the morning, alone, walking slowly through the dark house. I opened the kitchen drawer and took what he had mentioned, a simple clove of garlic. Next, I grabbed a piece of paper and any pen. And then, I went to the place where, according to him, everything should begin. The bathroom. He had said that this is the most energetically neglected place in the house. The place where everything is discarded can also be the place of transformation, he commented, almost like a proverb. I confess, I felt ridiculous at first, but something inside me insisted, as if I were about to cross an invisible door, and all I needed was to allow myself to believe for a few minutes. On the paper, I wrote the total amount of my debt. A heavy number. Dirty. It seemed that by placing it there, it became real again. With the garlic in hand, I took a deep breath. And even without exactly understanding why, I repeated in a low voice. With this gesture, I released the weight I carry. May this energy go, and not return. I put the paper and the garlic inside the vase. I flushed the toilet. The sound of running water seemed to last longer than usual, and as strange as it may seem, at that moment, something changed. Not financially. Not yet. But the air in the room felt lighter. My chest didn't hurt as much. I slept that night as I hadn't slept in weeks. Maybe it was just psychological, maybe not. But what matters is that night marked the beginning of a transformation I could never have imagined happening. The first signs. The next day, I woke up with a strange feeling of lightness. It wasn't as if everything had changed. My debts were still there, and the bank balance remained in the red. But, for the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up with that suffocating pressure in my chest. While I was having my coffee, something caught my attention. An email, one of those we don't even open anymore, of sheer exhaustion. It was a message from an old professional contact, asking if I was still available for a small project. It wasn't much, but it was something, and at that stage, any sign of movement seemed like a miracle. On the same day, I stopped by the pharmacy to buy my son's medicine, and for the first time in months, the price was cut in half. The attendant explained that the system applied an automatic discount. She herself couldn't explain how that happened. Small coincidences began to accumulate. An invoice that arrived with a different amount than expected. An old charge that disappeared from the system. A message from someone I hadn't seen in years, offering help without asking for anything in return. It was as if the world had tilted slightly in my favor, even though I didn't know why. Of course, part of me still doubted. Maybe they were just coincidences. But the more I tried to rationalize, the more the events defied logic, and it was at that point that I began to wonder, does transformation begin when we let go? When we try to control? I remembered something James had said seriously. It's not about the garlic, it's not about the paper, it's about what you are willing to let go of. That marked me, because, until that moment, I was trying to control everything. The debt, the future, in my thoughts. But, upon performing the ritual, something went away. Perhaps not the debt, yet but the despair that accompanied it. And just that already seemed like a miracle. The reality that responds. As the days went by, I started to pay more attention to the small details. Not only in what was happening outside of me, but in what was transforming within me. I no longer reacted with the same panic to the bills. I slept better. I thought more clearly. It was as if the storm were still outside, but I had found a dry place within myself. It was then that I remembered an old saying, something I had heard a long time ago, but had never truly understood. The external world is a reflection of the internal world. This idea, repeated in many spiritual traditions and philosophical teachings, always seemed beautiful to me, but vague. This time, however, it made sense like never before. Maybe the ritual worked not by changing the world, but by changing the way I positioned myself within it. Researching further, I found ancient studies, most of them set aside by modern science, that talked about how human intention can affect surrounding fields. Some of these ideas came from quantum physics, others from experiments like those of Masaru Emoto, which suggested that words and feelings are capable of even altering the structure of water. Could this be proof? I don't know. Many say that these studies have been refuted. Others argue that science still does not have the right tools to understand the invisible, and perhaps that's exactly the key. Not everything that transforms needs to be visible. In Buddhism, there is a teaching that echoes this idea. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. This phrase, attributed to Siddhartha Gautama, speaks directly to those who have tried to change the world without first changing themselves. And there, in the midst of the silence of my bathroom, with a simple ritual done purely out of faith, something inside me reorganized. It could have been symbolic. It could have been energetic. Or maybe it's all of that together. laced with something we don't have a name for yet. But the fact is, after that, Dev started responding to me differently. The complete ritual. A few days after the first conversation, James called me again. This time, he would guide me through the entire ritual, without haste, with care. Don't skip steps, he insisted. Every detail has a reason, even if you don't understand it now. We start by preparing the environment. According to him, the space where the ritual is performed needs to be clean. Not just physically, but energetically as well. Avoid distractions, he said. No cell phone, TV on, or noise around. You will need your full presence. The first step is to choose the room. And as strange as it may seem, he told me to go back to exactly the same place. The bathroom. This is the exit channel. Everything you want to remove from your life needs to be delivered there. I didn't argue. I had already learned to respect what I did not yet understand. I gathered the objects. A clove of garlic, representing the breaking of negativity. A little bit of ground cinnamon, associated with prosperity. A little bit of cinnamon powder, associated with prosperity. A small mirror, to reflect what we want to transform. A small mirror, to reflect what we want to transform. A green candle, symbolizing the flow of abundance. 2 pieces of white paper and a dark pen. James explained that each item has a symbolic function. You don't have to believe, he said, but you need to respect the process. On the first piece of paper, I wrote down the name of the main source of my debt, a bank. In the second, I wrote down the exact amount that kept me awake at night. Then, I sat in silence for a few minutes. I observed the candle flame. I placed the mirror so that it reflected the light directly at me. On the garlic clove, I carefully wrote the same debt number. I sprinkled cinnamon over it. So I closed my eyes. I breathed. I focused. And I said in a firm voice, with this gesture, I close this chapter. I make way for the new, to lightness, to abundance. Finally, I took the most unexpected step. I took everything to the toilet. Paper, garlic, and intention. When the flush was activated, I felt as if something symbolic was leaving. Not just a number or a name, but the weight that those things carried within me. WHAT went away, and WHAT remained. In the days that followed, something changed. It wasn't a thunderclap, nor a spectacular miracle. It was more like a breeze coming through a window that had been closed for a long time. The charges didn't disappear out of nowhere, but the responses started to come. People who used to avoid me started replying to messages. An old client referred me for a new job. A payment that was stuck finally came through. But more than the money, what impressed me the most was what happened inside me. That constant feeling of being trapped in a dead-end tunnel disappeared. The fear that lived in my stomach simply lost its strength. I had let go. Without realizing it, I had stopped identifying with the debt, with the scarcity, with the failure. That burden I used to carry as an extension of my name suddenly no longer seemed like mine. It's curious how, sometimes, we can only change the world out there when something silent changes inside here. And maybe that's why the ritual works. Not as a magic formula, but as a symbolic turning point. The human mind operates in deep layers. When we do something with a clear intention, even if it seems simple or strange, the brain registers it. And if the mind understands that something has ended, the body begins to behave differently. The choices change, reactions change, and the world responds to that. I can't say that the ritual erased my debt, but I can say, with complete certainty, that it erased the version of me that was trapped in it, and that was what paved the way for the new. Maybe that's why many ancient traditions, including Buddhism, have always placed such great value on symbols. Simple gestures, cleanliness, and detachment. Because it's not the world that needs to change first. It's the bond we have with what holds us back. And sometimes, throwing something away, even if it seems trivial, is exactly what was needed to free what had been trapped for too long. Detachment according to Buddha. Long before any ritual with garlic, mirrors, or candles, there was already an ancient teaching that spoke about letting go of what binds us. Siddhartha Gautama, the one who would become the Buddha, abandoned an entire palace, wealth, comfort, status in search of something that money could never buy, peace. But he didn't just give up material possessions, he gave up the idea of control, from the attachment to what was transient, of the illusion that security lies in the things we accumulate. This teaching is simple but profound. Everything that arises will inevitably pass. And this also applies to debts, bad luck, the feeling of failure. None of this is fixed. None of these states is permanent. But there is a detail that few notice. For something to leave, you need to make space. And sometimes, making space means letting go of what you hold onto so tightly, even without realizing it. That's when the ritual started to make more sense to me. It wasn't about solving my problems, but about distancing myself from the identity I had built around them. After all, how many times do we say, "I'm unlucky, I am poor, I am in debt"? These words are not just phrases, they are invisible contracts with the reality we insist on repeating. The ritual, in its own way, breaks this contract. It symbolizes a silent decision. I will no longer carry this with me. That's why the place where it is made matters. Because the bathroom, this ignored space, represents the place where we leave what the body no longer wants. And there, by throwing away a simple object, with real intention, you declare, I no longer accept that this defines who I am. The ancient masters always knew. External cleanliness is just a reflection of internal cleanliness, and as long as you cling to the weight you should have already let go of, it will remain there, invisible, but present. Letting go is the first step. The rest, life takes care of. Routine is ritual. After that day, I never saw the bathroom the same way again. It stopped being just a functional room and became a daily reminder. Everything that needs to go needs a way out. And I'm not just talking about trash or sewage. I'm talking about hurts, fears, old beliefs, stories that we repeat without realizing. That which gets stuck in the corner of the mind, creating weight without making noise. Gradually, I began to transform small gestures into conscious practices. For example, when cleaning the sink, instead of just scrubbing out of habit, I would mentally say, may everything that no longer serves me be taken away now. When closing the toilet seat, something I used to not even notice, I began to see it as a gesture of respect for the energy of the house. James said that, in many ancient traditions, keeping the toilet lid closed was a symbol of containing prosperity. If it is always open, what is good escapes? He used to say. Is it true? I don't know, but I started testing, and something curious happened. The more attention I paid to these small acts, the clearer my mind became. The house seemed lighter. The days flowed with less resistance. I discovered that, just as there is a buildup of visible dirt, there is also an invisible buildup, mental, emotional, energetic. And if we don't regularly empty it out, we end up living in a congested internal environment. In Buddhism, there is a practice called Shojin. It is the idea of purification through simple actions, done with full presence. Washing the dishes, sweeping the floor, preparing food. Everything can be sacred if done with intention. And perhaps the ritual with the garlic was just that. An unexpected way to remind me that even the most mundane gestures carry power. It wasn't the garlic. It wasn't the flush. It was what I put there along with them. The choice to let go. Since then, I've started to wonder, how many things am I carrying that could have already gone away if I had let them? The weight you can let go. Today, looking back, I can't exactly say when things changed. There wasn't a single magical moment, nor a movie twist. The transformation came in silent waves, some so subtle that they almost went unnoticed. And perhaps, that's the biggest secret no one talks about. Real change doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't come through the front door. She slips through the cracks of your attention when you start to open up. That's how it all started for me. With a simple gesture, with the courage to let go of what no longer made sense, even without guarantees of what would come next. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're also carrying something that should have already left. Maybe you have debts not just with the bank, but with your own history. Guilts that you don't even remember where they came from. Inherited fears. Old frustrations kept as if they were part of who you are. But what if they aren't? And if all of this could be released? And if all it takes is a gesture symbolic, sincere, to start a new narrative? I'm not saying that a ritual changes your life on its own, but I can say it changes your position in life, and that, in itself, changes everything. The question that remains is not whether the ritual works. The question is, what, exactly, you waiting to let go of? What do you need to throw away, literally or symbolically, so that the new can come in? What is taking up too much space inside you? In the end, everyone carries their own weight, but no one is obliged to keep carrying what no longer serves them. Maybe today, now, you can look at something that has always been there, an object, a memory, a belief, and decide, this no longer belongs to me, and let it go. Because sometimes, the greatest revolution of our life starts by flushing a toilet.